The next conversation is about something that I know is very important to a lot of folks here, house music. I sent along the list of panels to folks, and they were looking through the list, and they were like, house music? Why house music? They're looking at me like, oh, you're definitely not from here. Oh, you're not from Chicago. And what I told them is house music is about building a world, even if just for a few hours, another kind of space, another kind of place to be together. And that's why we're talking about it today. Moderating this conversation is the co-founder of Deem, Nu Goteh, who you've seen multiple times today. Also on the panel are Frederick Dunson, DJ Lady D, and Joseph Henry. I'm going to introduce all of them now. Frederick Dunson is the Frankie Knuckles Foundation Founder, President, and Executive Director. Founded in December 2014, the Frankie Knuckles Foundation is a nonprofit, educational, and cultural organization dedicated to the advancement of Frankie Knuckles' mission as a global ambassador of house music through media, conservation, and public events, continuing and supporting the causes he activated. And if you don't know who he is, you're going to hear about it in just a second, and you should know by now. DJ, producer, music publisher, and one of the key figures of Chicago house music, DJ Lady D. Among other places, she has graced the stages of ARC, South by Southwest, Lollapalooza, and on and on and on. And Joseph Henry, a designer and curator who recently co-curated the British Pavilion at the 2023 Venice Architecture Biennale. In 2019, he co-founded the social enterprise platform Sound Advice to explore new forms of social practice through music. If you can join me and welcome them all to the stage now.
Hello, hello, hello. So this conversation was instigated by me. I love music, I love house, and I love talking about music and house and places. And then I was thinking through who are some of the co-conspirators that I would love to engage with. And I will say that this conversation is one that is going to meander. There were questions that I sent to y'all. If you notice, I don't have the paper with me. But I also warned you via email that we were going to meander a little bit. And also, if you notice, we have this wonderful setup in front of us that includes a turntable, a mixer, and a CDJ, because we actually want to play music as we're discussing the music itself. And so, to kick off the conversation, I would really love to know from everyone here, when you hear the term house music, what do you think of? If you want to start. We don't have to, if you want to.
Well, you look this way, so. Hello, hello, hello. When I think of house music, I think of a good time. Boom, 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 boom. I think of records with a message. I think of people dancing and with no inhibitions, letting their inhibitions go. I think of a really good time.
I guess we can go in order. I think of house as liberation. So I think it is a just full form of expression, total freedom, absolutely letting go of everything. So to that point, it's a feeling. It's just the feeling of letting go, letting go.
I'm also very aware that I'm a British person in Chicago talking about house music. I was saying to News, like me inviting him to London to talk about UK grime in front of a London audience. It reminds me a lot of my mum. I was saying to New earlier, I thought all the Chicago house artists were British growing up because it was so prevalent in my upbringing. I always thought Robin S. and Crystal Waters and Inner City were all British. artists. And it makes me think of her, but it also makes me think of, I think, freedom and common ground. And I think that's why I've always been interested in sound and sonic experiences more broadly, because I think it's a space of common ground in a society where there's very few spaces like that.
So before there was house, there was...
And you look at me again.
I know, I'm gonna...
So I can only speak from my perspective, my experience. There were gay bars that played disco and dance music. And as I said to you earlier, I don't consider house music as house music. I consider, or disco or dance, it's dance music. So, because why? It makes you dance. But lately, people have been trying to school me on what is house, and so I go, oh, okay, whatever. And so, again, I go back to those bars or those spaces or those parties that people held in their house to listen to music, to dance to. So it was R&B, kind of revved up and speeded up, and you just kind of dance. So that was what was there before people started calling it house. So, and don't ask me about the origin of house and how, because in Chicago, that's a whole different can of worms you don't want to open up.
We're not here to fight, so
Okay.
we're not gonna...
Okay.
We're not here to open up a can of worms, but what I would love to do, you mentioning disco and dance music, and especially if anybody has ever gone to a party where they're playing house music, you don't just hear house music. There's so much context that goes into it. So I would love Lady D to play us something right now to illustrate what we mean by some of the disco music that led into house music as a culture.
Yes, okay. Sure, yeah. Will you please? Okay, so I brought a few different records, but this is one that I think really epitomizes what the sort of the transition between disco, because this is a disco record, that made its way into house music, that made its way into house music sets, and the songs that you would hear at parties when I first started going out to house music parties, which was my freshman year of high school. And so this was a big hit at the time. So do you want me to tell people what it is, or just put it on first?
Well, let's play it first and then...
Suspense.
All right. And we're only gonna play like a minute or so because there's a lot of great music and talking that we want to get through. Oh. And so what was that?
Okay, so that is called There But For the Grace of God, Go I. It was by a group called Machine. Machine was fronted by a guy named August Darnell. August Darnell, some of us know, is Kid Creole and the Coconuts, Savannah's band. I forget, it's a really long title, but they did so many. Don Armando's, the Deputy of Love. He had so many things going on, and he and his brothers were writers, Cody Mundy, and they had so many songs. So many different aliases, but this was a disco cut that came out in 1979 and made its way up the charts but also is just a classic. I mean, it talks about a family, a couple that has a baby, and they want to protect this baby. They are in the Bronx, and they want to protect this baby, so they move away to somewhere that they think is nicer, cleaner, overseas, and to protect the child. But the child ends up, well, they try to shelter her, and the child rebels, and so she ends up doing, all of these rebellious things, like drugs and going out, and she runs away when she's 16 with some guy, and she probably ends up pregnant. So it sort of backfires. You can't really keep people out, but the chorus, "There Before the Grace of God," is really the thing that I think connected people in the house community, because it was like, listen, we don't judge. You can't judge someone because we're all here just by the grace of God. So let's, live your life. And so, I mean, I saw people jack crazy on this, like jump off the walls, jump on the speakers. It's that kind of thing that really spoke to your inner feeling of well-being and not wanting to be judged in this world and just wanting to live. And so that, I think, was the thing that really connected audiences with it. And then, it was a little risque with the lyrics, right? We want to live somewhere where there's no blacks, no Jews, no gays. I think people, saw themselves in that lyric too as being somebody that sometimes society could look upon as a pariah, or somebody that they didn't want to be next to in proximity, especially in Chicago, where we have all of this specific, land-based segregation around communities and neighborhoods.
So to help paint some of the context of a song like this in spaces like the warehouse, right? So that being a space that's predominantly playing disco, playing house to Black, brown, queer crowds, audiences, I guess, where was the warehouse in proximity to some of the communities that were going there?
So I'm gonna go from the last location to previous locations and work my way back to where I first encountered the warehouse at. Before, the first time I went to the warehouse, it was located at 555 West Adams, where Kent Law School is now, right across the street from the last location at 206 South Jefferson. And before then, it had been 2-3 other different places in the South Loop, 13th and Michigan, somewhere on right off Lake Street, and another location. So that was all before my time. When I went, it was 555 West Adams. And so the West Loop was desolate then. It wasn't the developer's dream that it is now. And even toward the end of the longevity of 206 South Jefferson, the neighborhood had started changing, because a block and a half from where the warehouse is, there's this huge Catholic church. And at that particular moment, the Catholic church, that particular parish, had a lot of political pull. So you would often have the police come by the warehouse toward the end of the evening saying, turn it down, because they were having mass, Sunday mass, at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. So the area was kind of desolate. There wasn't a lot going on there, but now that's a whole different story. And so it was in a building. I won't say the building was abandoned, but it was a warehouse type of building. You could tell it was a manufacturing kind of place. And the space lent itself to nothing being there, except for the bar and mirror balls, couple of lights, parachutes, balloons, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the kind of neighborhood it was in.
And then Joseph, you wonder why you're sitting here as a British person in a conversation in Chicago about house music. So Joseph was a co-curator of the UK Pavilion at the Venice Architectural Biennial last year. And if y'all were here last year, Tony Griffin and I and Jermaine had a great conversation. And I was with Tony the other day, and she said to me, she goes, wow, the after party for the symposium, which is, we have an after party tonight, but the after party for the symposium was one of the best parties I've ever been to. The only party that rivaled it was a party that Joseph threw at the biennial. So then I was like, okay, well, okay, that's good to know. But what was interesting was that in Joseph throwing that party and the collective that he got to DJ, I understood even just from the selection of the people, I was like, oh, Joseph not only understands music and communicates in music, but also has an understanding of a diasporic lens of how music comes together. And so as we were preparing for this, there were some questions in terms of tracks that we were selected. And there's one track that you selected that you wanted to share that I think, as we're talking about disco integrating into house, like you're coming from another perspective. So I would love to play that track. Let's see here. It's on 3.
Since I came to know you, baby, I've been telling you how sweet you are. I've been telling you how good you are. Now I want you to try to tell me how you look. Tell me, tell me, tell me, tell me, tell me, tell me, please tell me how you look.
You look so good, fantastic man.
And so William Onyoba, fantastic man, funk, electro-ish, Nigerian, why?
I'm interested in the Black Atlantic as an experience. So my family is Jamaican. I'm interested, since I moved to America, how many things have been similar to the West Indian or Caribbean experience, to the African American experience. And in Paul Gilroy's book, he talks a lot about sound culture being the beginnings of black visual aesthetics. And there are these like tenets that you can trace from Africa to Brazil, the Caribbean, to America. And it's only really clicked today when I was listening to one of the first conversations about how people, and I knew this, the Great Migration, and how that was another moment of displacement. But there's the same thing that my family in London went through, coming from Trelawney in Jamaica over to the UK. So there's this sort of like universality through different contexts, from Middle Passage to the Caribbean or South America or the East Coast of Brazil, and then onwards again. That seems to like unite us, and I think it's just worth exploring that there are maybe universalities in the Black experience from the displacement, the first displacement of slavery onwards, which I just think is important to explore and acknowledge. And I think it's interesting to see William Onyobo in Nigeria being given, he actually studied in Russia and brought back technology from Russia from the Soviet Union at that time to Lagos and started making basically electro funk house music totally detached from what was going on in Chicago or in the UK. And I think there's something that resonates those different experiences together, and you can hear it in music. Because I'm interested in how music is contextual, so you go to Miami, a lot of the music that comes out of Miami, you feel like couldn't exist anywhere else. But then I'm very interested in places where music transfers over. And I think it's interesting that Chicago, first you had house music, sort of jumped into the UK and became UK garage. And then more recently, drill music, which originates in Chicago, has now become the sound of London. And there's been 2 moments where like music from Chicago has jumped across the Atlantic and found a second home in London. predominantly, and I'm just interested in why that is. And I think there is some universality or some deep historic resonance that this music or modality, as Isabel was saying earlier, that translates across generation and place.
So speaking of place, one of the things I'm very interested in is this idea of placemaking, which is a controversial idea because it insinuates that someone is coming in and creating a place, right? Space being negotiated, being turned into a place. But recently I was in a conversation where I brought up placemaking and somebody raised their hand and they were like, oh, well, placemaking is it's controversial. And then I was like, cool, heard it. But then afterwards, I sat with it and I started thinking about why placemaking is controversial. And I said to a colleague of mine, I was like, oh yeah, placemaking is controversial when it is an external force that's coming in and then insinuating that what was there wasn't of value and we're going to place value there. But I think to throw away the term placemaking also negates the work that's happening from the people who were there already, who created the value within the place. And so especially when we're talking about where the warehouse was, and you're like, it was a warehouse, right? There was a disco ball, there were some things there, but it was desolate. So I guess, how did y'all make this space that was empty into something that was a place of worship that rivaled the church?
Okay, because I don't want to take responsibility and be accredited with being one of the architects. It was already in place by the time I got there. So granted that if you did the math, yeah, okay, fine, I was there. However, there were people who paved the way so how I got there was I had a brother 3 years older than me, and he went away to college. He came home, and all he was talking about was the warehouse. And I'm like, okay. And luckily, we had a common thread. We both were gay. So at that time, he didn't know I was going to bars because he's like, how are you going to bars and you're just a kid? At any rate, we get there, we get to the spot, and so he had been previously, and all he could talk about was, oh, you got to go, you got to check it out. I don't know what was in the space before Robert and Ziggy and all of the people who were there before me, who was actually doing, who was actually partying there. I don't know what was in that space before then. I can speak to 206 because at that point, my friendship with Frankie had began. So that particular space, the last space, was a manufacturing factory. And they went in and turned it from a factory into the club that it was. I'm assuming that the space at 555 was some sort of factory as well, or some sort of manufacturing company as well. And they took that and cleared it out and made it a space that would be safe and conducive for people to come and dance and commiserate and fellowship with.
I guess what else went into that? Because any space can be a space that people can come and do that, but I guess what made the space that you were in, that you and Frankie built, into something that felt special? Were there rules? Were there rituals? Was there a membership?
There was a membership.
What was the criteria
there was
for the membership?
At the beginning, it was that you either knew someone had to call your name in, and you got there. So I'm going to relive the very first night I went there. And we took this kind of rickety elevator up, and there was this gentleman named Benny Winfield. And Benny was sitting behind the desk, and he was tall, he was a model. And he had a slight disposition that, wasn't the friendliest. And so he was like, yes, what do you want? How can I help you? And so that having that sort of rigidness at the door kind of kept away the undesirables or people who were not like-minded and coming into that space and being a part of that space. And so to answer you the first part of your question, I think them clearing it out and having some sort of template, because Robert had went to New York and other people had did things before Robert broke off, because there was another group who was doing something else at another particular locale. I think they mimicked what they saw in New York and brought it here and made it, stylized it to Chicago. Now that's only my opinion. Those people would probably say, well, that's not what we did. No, we didn't do it. But in my eyesight, that's what they did. And then having to go to New York after experiencing the warehouse, when I came back home, I said, oh, that's the same thing that they're doing in New York. So those spaces, I think they made them, they cleared them out enough to make them to what they wanted it to be.
And I know we chose some tracks from there. I figured I can play one of them.
One of the tracks I asked you, you asked me about?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. To just, paint the picture, the audio picture of what was being played in these spaces.
So it would be similar to what you asked me to.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
So I think let's go. I mean, actually, I was talking to Norman. I don't know if Norman is here. There you go. What's up, Norman Teague? Talking to him yesterday, and I was mentioning this conversation and some of the music that we would play. And I was like, oh, yeah, we're going to play Love is the Message. And he's like, oh, yeah. Arthur J. for Love is the Message. I was like, no, not that one. I was like the doom, 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 doom,
MFSB, the anthem.
The anthem.
The anthem.
And he was like, oh, that is Frederick's favorite song.
One of, yeah.
Do you have a favorite part of the song?
You're getting there.
Huh?
You're getting there. So this record has transcended past. Now the ballroom kids, it's one of their favorites. They have now made it and taken it and made it their anthem as well. Especially when they do the walk-offs and yeah.
And I mean, this is a remix, right? And I think the playlist has been playing throughout the day, and I put the original on here. So some of y'all may have heard the original playing, but I guess even the context of of this song, comparing it to the original, right? Like being able to capture those key moments, extending them. Oh, this is one of my favorite parts right here.
I just love how it's all in time, and these are live musicians. You know, this isn't a drum machine. These are musicians playing in time, so it doesn't go off, you know? It's metronomic quality to this playing, and it's a ton of musicians playing, you know? But give it up to the mixer and the engineer too, because they really did a great job with the mix.
And MFSB was Gamble and Huff's. That was their house musicians.
And that's the sound of Philadelphia.
The sound of Philadelphia,
TSOP,
yeah.
so.
But just to go back to the Paul Gilroy, he sort of creates like 4 aesthetic principles of like black visual aesthetics. One is montage, so that song would speak to montage, finding something. Another one is dramaturgy, so the art of the dramatic, like being dramatic. The other is improvisation, so you've got a live piano player who is probably not is like feeling it and doing it. And the other one is antiphony, so call and response. So the idea that you put something out, you get something back. And he argues that that is the foundation of the black visual experience, starting from African music. And I think you pretty much can look at any black sonic culture and find those 4 elements in it, which is why I picked the William Onyeabor song, because it sort of speaks to that, but in a very different, it comes out, it translates differently, but most black culture, if you were to trace it, like hip hop is a montage, improvised call and response culture. And I think that's what's so interesting. That song, just like, I was listening to it, I was like, okay, this fairly fits Paul Gilroy's framework. But that is also being practiced in London, or in Miami, or in Brazil.
So, man, it's kind of hard because I love that song and I want to keep listening to it for the next 5 minutes, because I'm sure whatever's happening now, yeah, is amazing. And then there's a breakdown, like, yeah.
It goes on and on.
Yeah, it goes on, and it's amazing, and it's like 8 minutes long, and I always joke with people that I don't really like songs that are made for the radio. They're 3 minutes. I need the 8 minutes. And we need to hear the intro, outro, breakdown. We need a moment, and that song is able to signify that. But going back to you, Joseph, and then I'm coming to you, ladies. So get ready. Thinking about this idea of placemaking. So for issue 4, the last issue of Deem that features Theaster Gates on the cover, and it's available at the gift shop. We're really trying to start to examine this idea of placemaking from a formal sense, but then also placemaking from the natural, instinctive sense that usually happens within black spaces. And so in the interview with Theaster, we went in to try to really get a formal answer from him in terms of what is placemaking and what is his practice of placemaking. You see everything he's doing on the South Side. And he threw us for a loop because he was like, placemaking is a rent party. Placemaking is the stoop. Placemaking is the barbershop. And once we got through that, he really started to talk about his education in the practice of placemaking. And what he was explaining to us is that usually it happens in terms of, and especially if you think about an religious or indigenous sense, that there is someone or a group of people who are elected as a steward. And those people will draw a perimeter of a space and determine that that space is of value or could be of value. Then they bless that space. They bless that space through a ritual. They bless that space through having codes of conduct that may be communicated and shared or maybe not. They bless that space through having a door person who is filtering. And then the people come, and the people pour value, love, and intention into that space that then turns it into a place. So as people who threw one of the best parties ever, Side note, it was hard to get into that party. It was a really great party. But I guess, what are your intentions when you are not only throwing parties, but really creating spaces and places for people to come and pour their intentions into it?
It's a really complex question. So if you play the song for 30 more seconds, I'll organize my thoughts. Okay, I think I'm ready. I always joke if I wanted to make money out of what I did, I'd call myself a placemaker, because then I have lots of clients who are really willing to work with me. I kind of think of myself more as someone who designs environments, and environments are both the material space, the things like the chairs, the furniture, and the immaterial, so the protocols that govern those spaces. The Shubs at Venice was the third of a series of parties, and we did the first one in the V&A, so we kind of are interested in subverting institutional spaces or institutional power structures. For Venice, the intention was that people saw our pavilion was about rituals and the power of rituals as a way of creating space, and how these rituals that people took from the West Indies and Southern Asia then came to the UK, became like a form of space making. What we really wanted to do is, I think a lot about interpretation. And so in a way, the party was a form of interpretation to make our pavilion make sense. So there's a scene in the film that we made where you see people setting up the Jamaican sound systems in London. Then it cuts to like the Punjabi community in Southall rolling around in BMWs with the same sort of technology in the back of their boot. So we hired like the one and only like stacked Jamaican sound system in northern Italy for the party, because we wanted people to see and live what they had like theoretically seen in the pavilion. So for us, it was about people understanding that you can, back to the idea of common ground, there is a space where you have the director of the V&A, the Minister of Culture of the UK, all these dignitaries, but the number one protocol I have for my parties is no guest list. Although the British Council were like, you can only invite 150 people, I think they got like 800 RSVPs, because we just totally ignored that. And I know you probably only got in because Jermaine texted me being like, broski, this line is not moving. Come get me. So I came outside and the queue was crazy. I was like, and I knew security really didn't like me because I had the music on full volume. And I was like, Jermaine, where are you at? And he puts his hand up. I was like, anyone who's with Jermaine, come with me. And like 25 people put their hands up. And I was like, okay, hold hands, we're going in. And we got everyone in, it was fine. Which is a very Chicago thing, because earlier in the day I seen Theaster, and he was saying, I can't get into your pavilion, there's a queue. So I was like, okay, I can queue jump you as a curator. He's like, right on. And then like suddenly, 30 people just appeared out of nowhere. I had to do the same thing. So something about Chicago and queue jumping. But a lot of it was about interpretation. So in our parties, I always make a film for the party. And the film is a form of interpretation. So you hear and you see the type of space we're trying to create. And I think film, and always montage films, always archive and new footage. And that helps people to center the environment that we're trying to create. So we don't have to necessarily tell people what's going on, they kind of feel it and understand it. And we just did one at Harvard, and I was like, this will never work at Harvard. This is not, it's not a vibe. I didn't put it on social media or anything. But it still worked there. And because we had the film going, we had the music, we had the sound system, we had those objects, the environment was created physically, and then also the protocols were in place to make sure that people felt welcome and felt reflected by and I always have a non-genre specific party. So you might hear like dancehall, you might hear hip hop, you might hear drill, you might hear two-step. It always switches, and that's so people can continually have the environment shifting.
There was definitely no guest list. There was a moment your dad came out, and I was thinking your dad was gonna be my plug-in, and he couldn't help me. No. But Jaden came out. He had family members who came, a younger cousin who couldn't get in. He went to console them. And as soon as he stood up, I reached my hand out to help him up. And then we got in with him. So in terms of you, Lady D, I mean, you've DJ'd around the world. As a DJ, your job is to turn a space into a place. Like, what are some of your intentions, your rituals, and your values that you use in order to get people on one wavelength?
My rituals, my values, and some tools that I use to get people on one wavelength. Yeah, I would love to think that there's all of this connectivity in a party. I think the fact that their physical bodies are there is enough, because people are going to go off and do different things. But how do you attract them to the dance floor, which is what I'm paid to do, which is my job, right? So it's about them having a good time. Like, I need them to leave more elevated than they were when they came in. And so I think when I choose the records, like, I do feel like I'm channeling in the moment and being responsive to their needs. You know, you can go in with a crate and feel like, okay, I'm gonna play this, and I'm gonna play that, and I'm gonna play that, and play none of it. And because what you're feeling from them is, oh, they need to go to church, or they need senseless party music, or they need some vocals that really speak to them. And I do start from a place of where I'm feeling and see where that goes, right? So if they're not feeling what I'm feeling, I might change it up. But I will get a sense of that, because it's my job to connect with each and every one of them. I have to see the guy in the back and see that he's not engaged. What's gonna engage him? You know, what's gonna pull him? I learned that trick from my brother who's sitting down here, Javon Jackson. It was another Chicago DJ who taught me a lot, but really, he did teach me that trick. Like, if somebody in the back, you know, you can kind of, like, that can be your game. You can say, oh, you're not gonna dance? I'm gonna make you dance, you know? And so I will, you know, give it up to him for that lesson, because we learn from each other. And my job is really to elevate people, to see smiles, to see bodies shaking, to see asses moving, to see joy and bliss and, you know, pure liberation, like literally people letting go. When I see that, there's nothing better. I'm like, I know I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Thank you, God, you know, I'm doing it.
If there was a record in your bag right now that this crowd needs to hear, I know, we're going off script.
Going off script. Well, that they need to hear right now, I would say we have to go back. I just love this. The reason why I love this is because, you know, in a day where people will call positivity toxic, and I get it, but this is definitely about positivity, and it's going to yes. I'm gonna speed it up a little because I like it a little bit sped up. Thank you. Yes, because it's a beautiful song, and I think it's definitely a mood elevator. And if you can just hear the lyrics. So, yeah, how do y'all like that one? Yeah. That's Sister Sledge, and that's actually produced by Chic, so we know now, and Bernard and Tony, and I mean, whew, just this whole album is great, but you know, there's probably like 6 hits on here, so I just love that song. I could have played number 1, 2, I could have flipped it over, played number 1, you know, it doesn't matter because all of those songs are great. Sorry, my record is a little bit dirty because I should have cleaned it a little more. But it's, I just got stuff out of storage, so sorry. A little crackly, but that's vinyl for you, you know. It's not clean. It can be very dirty and very snap, crackle, pop.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. So, Freddie, how you doing?
I'm fine.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. So you have a lot of responsibility.
Some days.
Yeah. So you, as the steward and the executor over the Frankie Knuckles Archive and the foundation, I guess I would love to hear from you, what does it mean to be, I guess, holding on to this Black legacy and creating ways for it to continue to grow and get out there? And where were some of the foundations and principles, especially, that you want to bring forward with the foundation?
So, okay, I don't want to get too teary on this, so I'll do it as best as I can. My job, or I feel that my calling, is to protect Frankie as I did when he was with us. And to make sure that his story is told correctly, because so many times, so often people come up with these conjured stories about him, and when they're telling me this, I'm looking at them going, okay, yeah, okay, if you want to say that. But to make sure that the legacy that he worked really hard to make himself and put himself where he was is kept intact. So there are things that we at the foundation want to do to make that happen and advocate some of the causes he was very passionate about: LGBTQIA+, youth homelessness, diabetes and AIDS research and prevention, and music in schools, which he was a big proponent of. The reason we organized is because right after his transition, people were doing all sorts of shit that we just, you know, every day you hear about somebody doing a benefit, and we're like, well, where's this money going? What are they doing? And people capitalizing on our grief and his family's loss to benefit them, and we not know what's happening. So Randy Crumpton, the late Randy Crumpton, said, this is not making sense. We need to get our hands around this and do something. And that's how we came about. So one of the initiatives, I feel, is that we continue to tell the story and the legacy and let younger people, because none of us are getting any younger, continue to tell that story so they'll be able to tell their story. There's a line in Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome, and the kid is or it's a teenager or an adult, talks about how you pass that story on and on and on, and the legacy on. So that's what we want to ensure happens, especially when it comes to house music and good house music. Not the type of stuff that, you know, you go, no. Good quality music. So true talk. And so, And so that's what we inspire to do. Now, has it been easy? No. Do we still have a way to go? Yes. But there are people who have came along and as benefactors helped us along the way. I recently attended IMS Ibiza a couple of weeks ago, and two of my board members who had previously represented and booked Frankie are two of the biggest agents in electronic music in Europe. And to hear them talk about the enthusiasm that they had about the foundation made me believe that, oh, okay, this is gonna happen. And so I stayed steadfast in my optimistic thinking that, yeah, we're gonna get there, and hopefully we'll be able to spread what I now call the gospel of Frankie.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I see people standing in the cut, which they're trying to get us out of here, but like any good DJ would do, we're gonna play one more track. You know, when security's trying to get you out, and you're like, just one more, and you put on your longest track possible.
I got like reprimanded by the British government for that at the party.
I mean,
I got summoned to the British Council to answer for my crimes of making. I was like to the DJs, play one more song, but make it a Fela Kuti 14-minute. They're gonna make us do the one more song. Let's make that one more song 20 minutes long. And they were.
We're going to play a minute
pissed.
of this. This one is actually selected by you, Joseph, but I'm sure it resonates with everyone. And the question was, if an alien landed on Earth and you had to introduce them to one house song, what would it be? And this was one of the selections.
Well, this is Jersey House, yeah. So it's good though.
My bad.
We played it so much in Chicago. A lot of people thought it was Chicago and they made it. So it's classic though, classic.
Follow me, 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 follow me.
All right. On that note, we got to shut it down. So I want to thank everyone on this panel for being flexible as we meandered through negotiating Black spaces, archiving Blackness, and finding different ways of communing and doing it in a way that allows for everyone to feel held, gathered, and also inform practices of placemaking through the lens of house music. And so we will be doing this in demonstration tonight. Lady D and I will be DJing the after party. So we hope to see you there. And thank you very much.
Thank you.